So we have yet another edition of Americans realizing just how strange the USA is after traveling or living abroad. So without further ado, let's get into this first video, Americans and fake friendliness. This should be interesting.
Just recently, I had a bit of a shocking experience about my sense of American friendliness. I don't know if you can tell, but I myself am American, but I've lived in France now for 4 years. And just recently, I was at a Christmas market with my boyfriend, and I was talking to him about how I felt a headache coming on. And my boyfriend said, well, maybe it's because you haven't eaten enough today. And a complete stranger jumped in and said, maybe you haven't drank enough water.
Okay. So I'm assuming the Christmas market was in the US because that would pretty much never happen in Europe. I'm not saying that sort of thing never happens, but it's very, very uncommon for that sort of thing to happen pretty much anywhere in Europe, to my knowledge. So I have a funny little story about this. This was actually my first reverse culture shock as well, because when we left the Netherlands, mind you, I spent 14 consecutive months in Europe, primarily in the Netherlands. So when we left the Netherlands, we had to fly from Amsterdam to London, and then from London to Dallas, which was where we went, because that's where my parents lived. That's where we stayed for 3 months earlier this year. And when we were boarding the flight from London to Dallas, mind you, most people from the UK have no interest in visiting Dallas whatsoever. And rightfully so, because there's not really much to see there. But I'm saying this to say that it was primarily Americans boarding the flight. And in the 14 months I spent in the Netherlands, I literally only encountered an American one time. One time in the Netherlands, and that was Sky. Shout out to Sky. We met up, I think, on my second to last day in the Netherlands. That was the only American I interacted with my whole time there. So didn't really have a whole lot of experience interacting with Americans during that time. We're boarding the flight, and I'm talking to my girlfriend, telling her, yeah, I really hope they have Interstellar on the movies on the airplane, because generally they have Interstellar, and that's my favorite movie. And whenever I take those long flights, I always watch Interstellar and then The Matrix. Those are the two films that I always look forward to watching. They ended up not having it, but that's besides the point. I'm telling her this, and then the guy behind me says, yeah, Interstellar is a great movie, man. And mind you, I've been in Europe for 14 months. So in my head, I'm thinking, wow, that's kind of an interesting coincidence that he just so happens to be talking about Interstellar as well. But then I sort of did that half turnaround thing because I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or not, and I didn't want to make it weird. But yeah, he was talking to me. He was looking right at me. And I don't even remember what we talked about after that. Didn't catch his name or anything. But that was kind of my reintroduction to American society, was that people will jump into your conversations. It's never really going to be for a negative reason. It's kind of an innocent thing. It's not really something worth stressing about. But as an introvert, it definitely took some getting used to. I also overheard two people in that same boarding line talking about the college they went to and connecting over having gone to, I want to say it was Purdue University, something like that, because one of them was wearing a sweatshirt that indicated he was an alumni of that school. And then they started talking about what they did. One guy was like, yeah, I run a construction firm. And then they started talking about their kids. One of their kids was going to college to play football. And I'm hearing all of this, and I'm like, these two people are probably never going to see each other again, but they are chopping it up like old friends. It's just not something you really see in Europe a whole lot.
I know I haven't since I've been here. I immediately know two things. First of all, this guy's an American. I can tell by the voice, the accent, the fact that he jumped into our conversation as if he was part of it. American. The second thing I know about him is that he's a tourist here in France. American tourists are notorious for complaining that there's not enough water accessible. Meanwhile, there are literally free water fountains everywhere.
Okay, so I was wrong. It did take place in France. Maybe part of the reason why he interjected into the conversation was because he was excited to see other Americans. That could be a possibility. I obviously don't know the guy. I don't know his psychology, but I would think that might have played a bit of a role, because I know that being here in Vietnam, to my knowledge, I haven't encountered any Americans at all. And we've been here for, I think, almost 3 weeks now. So if I see another American, let's say, for example, at the gym or something, I might feel somewhat inclined to talk to him. Granted, that's kind of a lie, I wouldn't, but I would feel more inclined to talk to him than I would a local because I know that he would be more receptive to conversation. So that could be part of it. As far as the water thing, look, I'm not gonna lie. Hold on real quick. That is one thing. Okay, I know many people disagree with me on this. I do not think Americans consume too much water. That's the one hill I will die on. I think consuming a lot of water is always a good thing. It is always a good thing. But as far as there not being a lot of water fountains or whatever, that is one thing I noticed about Europe. They generally don't have a lot of water fountains like you see in the US, just the regular fountains where you push the thing and the water shoots up. I don't like drinking from those anyways because to me that's probably where a lot of diseases are born. But in the Netherlands, at least, I don't know if this is also the case in France, but in the Netherlands, they don't need those because you can literally fill your bottle up from almost any tap and you'll be fine. Don't know how clean the sinks will be, but the tap water itself is going to be drinkable. Not just drinkable, but actually pleasant to drink. So let me know if that's also the case in your country, because I don't know if that's a Europe-wide thing or if that's only a few countries in Europe that have very good tap water.
But he launched into our conversation as
Oh, and also, I know I keep pausing the video, I apologize, but I don't see why they would think there's not enough water when you can just buy a water bottle at pretty much any store.
if he was already a part of it. But ultimately, he was trying to be friendly, so I tried to take it as that. And I asked where they were from, how long they had been visiting. He asked where I was from. And then, just as suddenly as the conversation started, he stopped it. He said, "Well, it was nice to meet you." And okay. Look, that's fine if you don't want to continue the conversation, but jumping in and then jumping back out of my conversation with my boyfriend, it was just kind of a surprise for me, even though I was born and raised in the US and that kind of behavior is completely normal there. It makes me think that maybe another reason why Americans are notoriously loud in public places, I wonder if they kind of expect that other people want to hear and join in on their conversations. Although I do believe this guy had good intentions, it was definitely a bit of a reverse culture shock for me.
That's interesting. I never thought about it like that. So my personal theory as to why Americans speak louder is because, in my experience at least, I found American environments to just be much louder in general. And it's something that is very difficult to understand until you go to the US. Because I've noticed that here in Vietnam, for example, it's the same thing. People here tend to be a lot louder because the environment itself is a lot louder. And that's no coincidence. It's because of car dependency. Cars tend to be very loud. They make a lot of noise. Even electric cars, they make a lot of road noise just driving, just existing in their state of being a car. They make noise. And at scale, that makes a lot of noise. And oftentimes I also found that in American public spaces, they play really loud music. And this is important because this is in the more walkable area. So even in the walkable areas where you're away from cars, which are very few and far in between, by the way. Because, for example, on the Vegas Strip, this is a very good example. On the Vegas Strip, they can drive cars straight down the middle. Don't know why. Don't know why they would do that, but that is the way it is. And between the road noise of the cars, and then of course you have people revving their engines, trying to show off and all of that. Didn't see a whole lot of that in Europe either, by the way. Different discussion for a different day. But you have the loud music where you can't even hear your own thoughts. Or even in calmer public spaces that I would frequent in the Dallas area, for example, they would have such loud music that it was difficult to hold a conversation. That's my theory, is that Americans are accustomed to more loud noises externally. Therefore, they're accustomed to having to speak up. Whereas in Europe, one of my biggest culture shocks was the fact that these public spaces tend to be a lot quieter than you would expect, given how many people there are. But that subconscious expectation that people are going to jump in, or maybe the subconscious almost not guilt, but the subconscious obligation to allow strangers into your conversation, that's something I never even considered. So I really appreciate that insight from her. Let me know what you think is the reason why Americans speak loudly, especially if you are from the US or have been to the US. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. On to the next video. My reverse culture shock experience part 2.
Okay guys, I'm having a huge reverse culture shock. And that is because as I'm spending time in the US, I'm realizing how much driving you can do in literally one day. For Thanksgiving, we drove from LA to Heber City, Utah, and within that one day, it was 11 hours in the car. I think for a lot of my friends in Spain.
So this right here, honestly, people always talk about how the European mind can't comprehend the size of the US. For me, it was kind of the opposite, where my American mind couldn't comprehend the size of Europe, because the idea that you could be in the Netherlands and in 8 to 9 hours of driving be in Switzerland, which is a place with a different language, a different culture, completely different, I guess, topography with the mountains. I don't really know what the term is for that. Let me know in the comments, but different weather patterns, all of that. That blew my mind. That absolutely blew my mind. Even flying places. It takes maybe an hour, hour and a half at most to get from Amsterdam to London. That's crazy to me, because an hour flight from Dallas will get you to Houston, which is also in Texas. So it's crazy how many different cultures and cultural customs you encounter within a smaller space. But she said she drove from LA, so I'm assuming she's from California. What people don't understand is that a city like LA, you can literally drive without traffic an hour and a half and still be in LA, not driving in circles, driving in a straight line from a place like Granada Hills to a place like San Pedro, which are both in LA proper. That will take you around an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours with traffic. These American cities are no joke.
Don't realize how much driving you can do in the States, because to them, driving in Spain, using the train, all of that stuff, you can do it all within one day. You get from the south to the north in one day easy. But for me, let's say if I wanted to go from LA all the way to New York, that's not fucking possible.
Well, it's possible. It's just going to take you a long time. I know it's possible because I did it with my girlfriend earlier this year. I want to say it took us around a week straight. We drove from Boston, actually, which is even further. We drove from Boston to LA, and it took us, around a week. And that was with us only staying in each city one day. So, matter of fact, no, I think we stayed in Chicago kind of 1.5 days because we explored a little bit of Chicago. But it does take a long time, around 42 hours, if I'm not mistaken, to drive all the way across the country. It's insane.
But then I started to think about it more, and before I moved to Spain, I realized, holy crap, every single day just with commuting and, getting around to see family, I was spending at least 2 to 3 hours minimum in my car every single day. But that's because, that's our main transportation, right? Every city, every place is built on driving and freeways.
That's very, very true. The US has a major urban planning issue, but it's also true that she is from LA. If you've been to Southern California, you know why that's a significant piece of information. Because, look, I've driven across the whole entire US multiple times, and LA is its own beast. It doesn't have the worst traffic in the US. I would give that title to New York by a pretty significant margin. But LA, the fact that you have to have a car basically to get almost anywhere, and the fact that the distances are so vast, even within LA proper, let alone the Los Angeles or Southern California metropolitan area, that's honestly incomprehensible, even for a lot of Americans who are also from car-centric cities. Because LA, I'm telling you, it has to be amongst the worst places in the whole world when it comes to car dependency.
So if you want to get to work, if you want to go to the grocery store, if you want to get to any destination, really, you have to use your car. And then I started thinking about it even more, and it's like, oh my God, I wasted so many hours in the car. Like, you spend a majority of time in total in your car, because that's the way you get to places. You know, doing road trips is a lot more common here because we don't have like the train system that, you know, connects us to all these cities and towns. Long story short, it's just like I do not miss the long car rides.
So I think kind of a misconception, and maybe I'm playing into this misconception as well with my whole spiel just now about LA. LA does have public transit. The issue is that it's unsafe and unreliable. And those two factors right there make it not worth the hassle for most people, because ultimately, even if you take public transit, you still have to cover these vast distances. It's still going to take a long time. Buses still have to navigate traffic as well. Granted, I think they might have bus lanes in some parts of the city, but the point is, it's not even the fact that they don't have public transit or they don't have public transit that matches the scale of the city. It's more that the scale of the city is absolutely incomprehensible even for a lot of Americans.
I do not miss spending a majority of my time in my car because at least in Spain, you can get around in the metro, you can get around on, you know, Renfe, you can just not be kind of isolated in your car.
What is Renfe? Is that the train system out there or the subway system? Let me know in the comments if you're from Spain, if you know what Renfe is.
And I think at times it's nice because you kind of have your privacy. Like that's definitely something I missed, you know, with public transportation, you have to share the space with a lot of people and it could be a little bit claustrophobic. But yeah, I'm just like, I'm over the 10-hour road trip car rides, guys.
So she has a point. As an introvert, I definitely appreciate the privacy of a car. The cool thing is that in Spain, they also have roads and they also have cars. So you have the option. If you want to get a car and you want to have the privacy of your car, you can have that. But you don't have to have it. That's the big difference. And ultimately, what I've come to realize is that even though I like the privacy of a car, I like the convenience of public transit more. In that, as someone who really values my time, I like being able to do other things while I'm en route to the place I'm going, versus driving and not being able to do that, at least if you value your life and the lives of those around you.